Hey everyone, this is Jolene Hammond. I decided to talk a little bit about Ruby on Rails for the new web information that we would be covering that we didn't cover here in the semester. So what I'll be covering in this video is a little bit about what is Ruby on Rails, why would we use it, and who are some of the companies that use Ruby on Rails for their websites. Then I will be getting into how to set up Ruby on Rails on a Windows machine. We will go and do a static Hello World tutorial, just using our newly installed Rails framework, and then at the end we'll just talk about, there's so many resources that you can go to continue to learn about this framework. So first of all, what is Ruby on Rails? Ruby on Rails is an open source web application framework. This application framework was originally created with the intention to make the developer's life easier. It is written in the Ruby programming language. Ruby is an object-oriented, easy-to-use scripting language that was developed in the 1990s, and Rails is the framework that uses the Ruby language. Ruby on Rails was open-sourced in 2004, and throughout this time until now, there's been many new release updates, and it's a very popular web framework. So now why should we use Ruby on Rails? Ruby on Rails advertises for two main conventions with their framework, and the first one is called Convention over Configuration. So this focuses on making the mundane decisions that are required for the program to run. Ruby on Rails does that for you. So the idea is to allow for more time programming and less time configuring configuration files. Some of those questions that are not so important but are important for the machine. Ruby on Rails takes care of that. This makes it super easy for beginners by handling the many conventions required, and then they can enjoy in ignorance. However, for more advanced programmers, you can also go in and customize the configurations to your liking. And secondly, Ruby on Rails follows the DRY ideal. So DRY stands for Don't Repeat Yourself. Following this convention makes the code more maintainable, extendable, and less buggy. One of the ways that they accomplish this is doing the MVC framework. And to review, what does MVC stand for? It stands for Model, View, and Controller. So Rails separates its code into three different ways, and the first is models. Models handle the logic and heavy lifting with databases. And the views render the page for the viewer, for the browser or user. And the controller controls the flow of the application between the view and the model. So when a browser initiates a request, the controller talks to the model and the view in order to provide those resources that are requested by the user. So once again, these two reasons is one of the biggest benefits of using Ruby on Rails. If you wanted to continue to learn more, you can go to their online documentation and read a little bit about what are some more reasons why you would want to use Ruby on Rails in your web application design. So some companies that use Ruby on Rails: Hulu, Airbnb, Groupon, Twitter, GitHub, and Shopify. If you wanted to see how their websites work and interact, you can go ahead and visit their websites and look at their source. But let's get into how would you set up Ruby on Rails on your Windows machine. So first thing you'd have to do is download the Ruby programming language, and you do that by going to rubyinstaller.org. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. Right here you see this big red download button. Go ahead and click there, and then right here you would see all the different versions available for Ruby download. I suggest for downloading a version of 2.4 or later, and mainly because the next few steps, the Ruby Dev Kit and the Ruby Gems, are automatically installed with Ruby 2.4 or later. So Ruby Gems is Ruby's packaging library that they use for all of the different packages that they would need to run their projects. And if for some reason when you downloaded Ruby and the Ruby Gems was not installed, you can manually download that going to rubygems.org. So to install Rails framework, Rails is a Ruby gem. And so you would go into the command prompt and you would type gem install Rails. And then when you would click enter, that would install all the necessary Ruby gems in order to run the Ruby on Rails framework. Lastly, however, there is one final step, and just a word about databases. Ruby on Rails will not run on your machine unless it is connected to a database. So the default database configurations that you can use are MySQL, SQLite, and Postgres. For me, I already have Postgres installed on my computer, so I will be using Postgres. But it's very simple to install and configure your database file. So whatever database you want to use is up to you. So now let's go ahead and create a static Hello World website using the Ruby on Rails tutorial. That way you can get a feel of how you create a new project and how you would go about navigating that. So to begin, we would go back to our command prompt. Let's get rid of this. And you can put your project anywhere you would like, and I'm going to put mine into my desktop in the Rails folder. And I'm going to create a new project called Hello World. Before I press enter, I'm going to specify the database to be PostgreSQL. If you don't specify the database, it automatically assumes SQLite, which is not too hard to fix, but this just makes it a little easier. And we're going to go ahead and press OK. Oh, Rails needs an S. And it's going to download all of those Ruby gems necessary in order to create and run your project. Now that it's completed, let's go ahead and change directory into our new project. And I'm going to open this project using the text editor Atom. So Atom over here shows us a little bit of the structure of how your first Ruby on Rails project is going to look like. And first of all, I am going to set up my database, which is actually in your configuration files, and it's in database.yml. You just need to add two things here. Your username to your database, which for mine is Postgres, and then a password. For this is password1. So go ahead and save that folder, and we're going to have to set up our database as well, which you're going to have to run 3 different commands. Rake db :setup. This creates the database. That can take a second to run. Okay, there you go. So creating this new database, mine already existed, that's okay. And then you do Rails db :migrate. So this will migrate all of your folders into your new database. And then to top it all off, once this is done loading, you would go ahead and run rake db setup again. And this will just do some final checks to make sure that everything is in order, and your database should be all set up using Postgres. So pretty simple. But now we want to create a static hello world. And to do that, we need to create a controller first, because the controller is the one who receives the request from the browser. So we're going to type Rails G for generate controller hello world. So this is automatically going to create a new control for us that we can use. So if we come back here to our text editor, I'm going to open up the app and go into my controllers, and you should see our new controller just created called Hello World. Now we're going to write a new method that's not going to do anything, it's just going to direct us to the view. And our view we're going to name index. So if you look here in our views folder, it created a new folder called Hello World. There's no views inside, but we're going to add a new file, and we're going to name this index.html. Add an h1 tag that says Hello World. go ahead and save that. And the final step, we're going to come back to our configuration folder, and we're going to go here to routes. So what this does is it's going to tell the browser where to look to find our controller so that it can render the page. So we're going to type in resources and the same name as our controller, which is up here. Hello world. And save that. So that should be everything that you need. Now we're going to start our Rails server. And once that is started, let's go over here. Let's open up a new tab and navigate to localhost 3000. And so this is our home page of our Rails project. And to make sure that our static page worked, we're going to navigate over to our controller page, our index page. And there we go. We have just created our first Ruby on Rails application. So I hope you guys found that to be informative, just getting you started with using Ruby on Rails and introduced. Of course, there are so many resources online. You can go to rubyonrails.org, which is the official documentation site. There's YouTube tutorials, and a lot of what I pulled was from lynda.com, just helping me get myself oriented in learning this as well. So if you have any questions or anything, go ahead and contact me. But thank you for watching.